The most loyal man in Tony Soprano's crew was also the worst pick for the job Tony gave him. Silvio Dante would step in front of a bullet for his boss. He'd take a hit. He'd lie to a grand jury without blinking. But here's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. That exact loyalty is the reason he was the wrong consigliere. And by the time you finish this video, you'll see why this one quiet decision broke the DiMeo family from the inside. Before we get into it, you need to understand what a consigliere actually is. Not what the movies tell you, not what Tom Hagen tells you, the real thing. A consigliere isn't muscle. He isn't a hitter. He isn't the guy taking calls at 3 in the morning to deal with a body in a truck. A consigliere is a counselor, a reality check. He's the one man in the family whose job is to tell the boss what nobody else has the spine to say. He sits between the captains and the dawn. He smooths things over. He keeps the peace. And critically, he carries no ambition for the chair. Because the moment a consigliere wants to be boss, every piece of advice he gives becomes suspect.
So's a good consigliere.
Now look at Silvio Dante. He was a brilliant earner. He ran the Bing. He was old school to his bones. He was, without question, the most loyal man in Tony's orbit. But Silvio was already underwater. He was up to his elbows in the day-to-day, running the Bing, killing rats when rats needed killing, handling sit-downs as Tony's right hand. He had no room left in his head to be the calm voice in the storm. And Tony needed that voice, badly. Look, I'm not going to pretend the Sil defenders don't have a point. They do. Silvio rarely argued with Tony. Even when Tony exploded, Silvio stayed calm. He was a wall. In a world full of egos like Ralphie, Christopher, and Polly, that kind of composure is rare. Tony almost never turned his temper on Sil the way he turned it on everyone else. Silvio also gave good advice when he gave it. He read the room better than anyone in that crew. When the war with New York started heating up, Silvio kept his head while everyone else was losing theirs. He saw things coming. He could read men. And let's not forget Omerta. Silvio was the heavyweight champion of keeping his mouth shut. If you locked Silvio in a federal interrogation room for a week, he'd come out with less to say than when he went in. In a world where guys flipped under pressure, that kind of loyalty was real currency. So the case for Sil isn't weak. It's actually pretty strong. But here's where it gets interesting. Loyalty makes a great underboss. Composure makes a great underboss. Handling the wet work without losing your cool? That's underboss DNA. None of those qualities are the same thing as being a consigliere. The job descriptions overlap on the surface. Underneath, they're completely different gigs. And confusing one for the other is how families fall apart. Here's the problem with Silvio as consigliere. He never really pushed back. A consigliere is supposed to be the friction in the system. He's the brake pedal. When the boss wants to go to war, when the boss wants to whack a guy who maybe doesn't need to get whacked, when the boss is letting his ego or his depression or his cousin Tony Blundetto drag the whole family into the abyss, the consigliere is supposed to say no, loudly, repeatedly, until the boss either listens or fires him. Silvio never said no. Not really. Not in a way that meant anything. Take the Tony Blundetto situation. Tony was making decisions that put the entire family at risk because he couldn't let his cousin go. New York was burning. The consigliere's job in that moment is to grab the boss by the collar and force the conversation. Sil didn't. Not the way the job demanded. Call that counsel if you want. It walks and talks like compliance with a disclaimer on top. There's also a structural problem. Silvio was too deep in operations. He was Tony's hitter when Tony needed a hitter. He was the one who drove Adriana into the woods and pulled the trigger himself. One of the most haunting executions in the entire series. And Sil carried it out personally. You cannot be the executioner and the counselor at the same time. The two roles cancel each other out. A consigliere needs distance. He needs to be able to look at a situation without being elbow deep in it. Silvio was elbow deep in everything. And then there's the loyalty itself. Yeah, I said it. The loyalty is part of the problem. Because here's the dirty secret of mob structure. A leader needs at least one person around him who is not afraid to disappoint him. If every voice in the room is loyal to the point of silence, the boss starts making decisions in an echo chamber. He starts believing his own paranoia. He starts mistaking flattery for facts. He starts whacking the wrong people. That's the DiMeo family in seasons 4 through 6 in a nutshell. An echo chamber wearing pinky rings. So who then? The obvious answer most fans throw out is Hesh. And on paper, Hesh is perfect. He's wise, he's measured, he's got decades into life, going back to Tony's father, Johnny Boy. He's calmed Tony down more times than you can count. He even sat at the table for real sit-downs alongside Tony, Phil Leotardo, and Johnny Sack. But Hesh has one disqualifying problem. He's not Italian. He can't be made. And in the structure of La Cosa Nostra, the consigliere has to be a made man. He has to sit at the table. He has to be respected by other families. A Jewish associate, no matter how brilliant, can't fill that chair without the whole commission laughing at the DiMeo family behind their backs. And don't bring up Tom Hagen. The Godfather comparison falls apart the second you look at it closely. Even in that universe, Tom being Irish was a scandal. The Corleones got called the Irish Gang by their rivals. Michael demoted Tom the moment he took over. The Godfather broke that rule on purpose, and the story itself shows it was a mistake. So Hesh, not viable. Even though, intellectually, he was already doing the job in the shadows. The real answer, and this is where it gets painful, was Junior. Yes, Uncle Junior. The dementia-riddled, paranoid, jealous, plotted to kill his own nephew, Junior. Because when you strip away the ego, Junior was a sharp, strategic mind. He'd been in the life since before Tony was born. He knew every family on the Eastern Seaboard. He had real respect from New York. He could read men the way other men read newspapers. The only thing standing between Junior and being a phenomenal consigliere was Junior himself. His ego couldn't handle being number two to his own nephew, and Tony's ego couldn't handle being told no by the uncle who'd practically raised him. Two fragile men, one job neither of them could ever take. And that's the real tragedy here. The deeper, harder truth about the consigliere question. Tony didn't pick the wrong guy by accident. He picked Silvio because Silvio wouldn't fight him. Because Silvio would do the job exactly the way Tony wanted it done. Because Silvio wouldn't sit across from him at the Bing and say the thing nobody wanted to hear. What Tony actually wanted from that chair was a yes man with a pompadour. Think about who Tony surrounded himself with. Christopher, who worshipped him. Polly, who flattered him. Bobby, who deferred to him. The captains he promoted. They all had one thing in common. None of them could check him. None of them ever would. The only people in the entire series who ever truly pushed back on Tony Soprano were Dr. Melfi and Carmela. One of them walked out the door on him after 7 years. He cheated on the other. So when you ask why Tony chose Sil over Hesh, over Junior, over anyone, the answer isn't strategy. The answer is psychology. Tony was a man who couldn't stand to be told he was wrong. He built an entire administration designed to never tell him. Picking Silvio for that chair was a tell, not a tactical error. It tells you Tony was already on the road to ruin before the federal heat ever showed up. It tells you the family was already rotting from the top. It tells you that for all his talk about the old days, Tony ran his crew nothing like the men he idolized. Because the men he idolized had Genco Abundando. Tony had a guy who liked his hair and held his tongue. Silvio Dante deserved better than the chair he got. He deserved to be the underboss he was clearly built to be. The guy running the day-to-day. The guy collecting envelopes. The guy at Tony's right hand for the wet work. But the consigliere chair? That chair sat empty for the entire series. Nobody ever really filled it. And the DiMeo family paid the price for that empty chair. One bad decision at a time, until the lights went out at Holston's. So here's the question I want you to answer in the comments. If you were Tony Soprano, with all the constraints, made man only, Italian only, no flipping risk, who do you put in that chair? Junior? A reformed Vito? Someone we haven't even considered? Make your case below. And if this kind of breakdown is your thing, the next one's already in the works.